Chris, let's talk about Spectrum. I say it's hot. It's hot because Verizon just inked a deal to buy Straight Path for $3.1 billion.
Yep.
And not just for $3.1 billion, but $3.1 billion is a great deal more than Straight Path was worth before these talks began. To what degree, if any, does that reset the valuation for any wireless spectrum assets? Because you're a holder.
We are a holder. I think the Straight Path spectrum is referred to as millimeter wave spectrum, which is very high on the dial, so to speak. It's north of 24,000 megahertz, where most of the spectrum used for cellular phones is in the 600 to 2,500 megahertz. So it's a different type of spectrum. It's line of sight spectrum. It has tremendous potential uses for small cell networks, for things like that, where
it's high bandwidth stuff.
Very high, very fat bands. So if the technology gets up to speed, it can be very interesting. It will not really, at least technology today doesn't exist for it to be usable for, cellular.
But can we extrapolate or straight line, right, valuation comparisons between what Straight Path sold for and anything else? For example, Globalstar, which is in play right now.
So yes and no. I think first I would say that Verizon, and everybody knows their amount of spectrum that they hold versus everybody else. They have half the spectrum that Sprint does, and are clearly in a catch-up mode to try to build out their spectrum inventory.
AT&T wanted it too.
AT&T wanted it. AT&T has about 50% more spectrum than Verizon, so maybe they needed it a little less, and certainly that extra couple billion. They didn't obviously find their way clear to spend that. But the difference is that Globalstar spectrum, which is 2.4, so it's right below Sprint's biggest block of 2.5 spectrum. When I say 2.4, 2400.
Yes.
That's like a Wi-Fi spectrum. So when you use Wi-Fi in your home, that's what you're using. And the unique thing about that is it's global. Now, they don't necessarily have licenses everywhere yet, but that path is sort of getting clear. So for a global player, maybe an Amazon, type player, that could be very interesting spectrum for them to have.
Or other companies that talk about doing networking globally. Google, for example, Facebook, for example.
All those, yes. And they're in a channel, channel 14, which is a different channel than we all now use for Wi-Fi. So to the extent that Wi-Fi gets more and more congested and slows down your usability, will have their own channel. So again, in the future, it'll be very valuable.
You have been in and out of Globalstar. The stock's trading at $2.30 roughly right now. Would you venture a guess as to what it should be worth?
Oh, quite a bit more, but it's a timing issue. It's how long it'll take. So one of the things about Spectrum is that, and Straight Path's a great example, maybe a month sooner, it would have traded for $40, a share. Really it's getting at the right time and having more than one buyer. I think it was a last second type of thing for Straight Path to introduce a second or maybe a third buyer even in there. When you have multiple buyers, then you get a bit of a frenzy.
Talk to me a bit about the spectrum assets you hold and whether you've been approached by a single or multiple potential buyers. Why aren't you harvesting those assets now? Why aren't you turning them into cash at a time when spectrum is clearly valuable?
So a lot of the spectrum that we hold, we get through acquiring companies from bankruptcy. And the spectrum has some things that need to be done in order to make it commercially saleable. It might be in an area that is not currently being used commercially. It might be part of a bigger band that there's right now there might be enough for today. But I think the key to understand about spectrum is it's like oceanfront property. There's only so much of it. And once it's all gone, it's all gone. And I believe that we're starting to see, and I think Straight Path's a perfect example, of a little bit of concern from the carriers about how much they will need in the future. We use so much more spectrum today than we used to use. There was an article in the paper about the amount of app usage. It's like 900 billion hours globally. So that's not going to go down, and that all requires more spectrum.
Does Verizon know what you have?
Possibly.
Possibly. How long is it going to take before you're in a position to monetize this stuff?
I think over the next 24 months, we're going to see a lot of action. And we don't necessarily want to be the first to move. I think again,
Didn't hurt straight path.
every piece that trades though means that there's that much less to go. And again, it's an asset that there is no more of. It's a supply and demand in a different way. Not like oil where you produce more oil, you drop your production. This is it. There's this much spectrum.
What about Intelsat? That's another stock in which you have a stake.
Yep.
SoftBank is trying to merge it with OneWeb. Keeps getting postponed. Is there deal risk there?
There's big deal risk there. We are a very significant bondholder as well, and they're looking basically to buy the company at a very big discount through tendering for the bonds. And there's a lot of discussion back and forth. And right now, there's not an agreement on
what do you think
the
happens?
tender. It's a great question. If SoftBank wants to pay a little more money, they'll get it. That's really what it comes down to.